and for 20-something years, the AWA was one of the big three.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, obviously, it was the biggest geographic territory because the Northeast, the WWF had the big population centers,
Right.
and the NWA was a consortium of territories, so it wasn't one single one. Yours eventually would stretch from Minneapolis all the way out to the West Coast. I don't think the people now can really understand, as a U.S. champion on TV in the 50s, how big Vern was as far as a household name, because television was new. Everybody was trying to watch it.
Well, somebody came up to me the other day after my dad's funeral, and he said, "You know, your father's in the Guinness World Book of Records." I said, "No, I didn't know that." He said in 1950, he was the only athlete to ever make more money, or as much money as Babe Ruth, made over $100,000. And it's a funny story. We were in Oklahoma, and he won the light heavyweight championship, and they were going on network TV. And they called and they wanted Vern to come up.
Yeah.
So he flew up to Chicago, or drove up however he got there, and he got in the arena, and Fred Kohler was the promoter at the time. And they're in the locker room, and Fred says, "Okay, Vern, here's what we're going to do with you. We're going to dress you up as a Martian, and we're going to lower you from the ceiling tonight." So Vern says, "No, you're not, Fred." He says, "Look I've got wrestling boots, tights. I was an NCAA Big Ten champion, NCAA champion on the 1948 Olympic team. If I can't make a living in my boots and trunks, I'll quit. But first of all, how many guys do you have here? 30? I'm going down to the ring. You can bring them in one at a time, two at a time, three at a time. If I can't beat them all, then I'll quit right now." And nobody got in the ring with him. So he went in with his tights and became a household name.
He made an impression on Kohler because Kohler made him the U.S. champion, and he was the only other guy besides Lou Thez and the NWA title.
Mm-hmm.
He could travel as champion and get a percentage of the house, which was 10% and 3% to Kohler instead of 10% to Thez and 3% to the NWA as he had. And because Thez may have been a more long-standing title holder, but the television was so hot and so new, more people kind of figured Vern was the champion than Thez, and that kind of got him heat later on, planted seed, even though it was Kohler's doing. Was there lasting problems? Is that why, when the network TV run was over, they never considered Vern for the title, and he took matters in his own hands?
He had to. I mean, he did wrestle Lou on, I think, 3 different occasions, if I'm correct on that. I know they wrestled in Chicago. Vern won, it was 2 out of 3. He won one fall, and then it won an hour. They wrestled a 90-minute match. I don't remember if that was in Boston or where that was. And then they had one other match where Vern won one fall, and they won a draw.
And that was in Minneapolis, like 1953 or 4. It was basically,
right.
He didn't get a title shot in Minneapolis for like 5 more years.
No, he never got another one.
Yeah, well, he never did get.
Yeah, he couldn't get one. And the promoters in the Midwest are trying to get the NWA to give Vern another match with Thez, and they want him as the champion. And as you know, the DuPont network ran for 7 years. Yeah. At the end, when WGN got involved, they made it was on 7 days a week, so it kind of burned itself out. So the only way he could get on
They
TV,
still went to syndicating the Chicago tape, but it wasn't nearly as strong, and it took quite a while.
Right.
Yeah.
So what they had to do was get themselves on TV somehow, some way, and most of them wanted to be paid. So he started his vitamin company with a gentleman, Joe Zweibeck, out of Omaha, Nebraska. He was doing TV for Joe Dusick at the time, and got tied up with Zweibeck, and they made their vitamins, Jer Speed and Ziggity Hoo for the kids. And
say that again?
Ziggity Hoo for the kids.
Well, there you go, kids.
There you go.
Get your Ziggity Hoo.
Get it.
And your Vitamita Vegemin also.
Right. So then he went to Detroit, and with his vitamins, sponsored the show and got it on. And didn't really want to work out of Detroit, so turned it over to Bruiser and the Sheik. They ran it.
Okay.
So then he came back to Minneapolis, became partners. He bought in with Wally Carbo and Dennis Stecker. And his job was really to...
Tony Stecker had just passed away, right? So Dennis was his son, and he was...
No, Tony was still there, I'm sorry.
Was he still there?
He was still there. He bought in from Tony, yeah. And then his job was to expand the territory. You know, that's what he wanted to do. Yeah. He knew what TV would do for it, and he said, we need television. So he would go to the Milwaukees, he'd go to Chicago, and he would meet with station directors, and he would barter the time. Keep, at that time, maybe there was 10 minutes of commercial time. He'd keep 5, and they'd have 5, and then he would use the time with his vitamins, and that's how he sponsored the shows.
And at the same time, the public story for forming the AWA, Thez had dropped the title to Edward Carpentier in 57 because they were going to do a deal where Carpentier was the champion, but it was a disputed decision. They were going to do a blow-off match, and then Thez was going to go overseas and wrestle, and Carpentier was going to have the title. And then Eddie Quinn and Sam Muchnick got sideways, and they just decided to ignore it. Then Carpentier, I think, made more money going around and dropping the world title to to a lot of people than he probably would have if he'd have had it. But one of the first, and obviously one of the highest profiles, Vern had beat him and won the Omaha version. Joe Dusick.
Right. Joe Dusick.
It sounds so silly now, Omaha, Nebraska, to have a world champion, but Omaha's business was so good then they had their world champion.
Good. It was huge.
But anyway, so Vern had beaten Carpentier, and basically they came out on television, and he challenged Pat O'Connor. The AWA had decreed that if O'Connor didn't answer Vern's challenge within 90 days, that they were going to declare him the true world champion, which is what happened.
And that's what happened.
And from that 1960 starting point, he set about making himself as credible a world champion as possible. In Minneapolis, he was already, excuse me, a sports hero. Everybody knew him from the University of Minnesota, and he'd had a lot of national press on TV and et cetera, but that was his home base. He was one of the first one of the national TV stars to go back to his home and establish his own company.
Right, and establish his own company. You were talking about network TV. He was the first to step out of the, nobody in wrestling had really explored the national TV.
Yeah.
And he became such a star, he got on the Howdy Doody show. Remember that?
Yeah.
With Buffalo Bill. He got on the Art Linkletter show. He was on with Jack Parr. I mean, he was the first one to step out of the ring and on those national TV shows, which really gave wrestling the credibility that it hadn't really got in the past.
Yeah.
So when he came into Minneapolis, and then in 1960, once he became the AWA champion, they expanded the territory to Milwaukee, Green Bay, Winnipeg, the Quad Cities, Peoria, all the way down to Springfield, Illinois.
Yeah.
Minneapolis, St. Paul, all the Dakotas, North and South Dakota, Omaha.
Oh, all Dakotas, all three towns.
All three towns. Well, there's more. Believe me, I've been to them. They're a long ways apart, and they're not fun to drive to. But the Dakotas, and then Denver, which was a huge market for us. Lincoln, Nebraska, Denver, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, where we did our ESPN program out of. San Francisco, and then Phoenix.
Yeah, I was about to say it took him 20 years, but he got all the way out to the ocean.
He did.
Oakland and
he got out
the Bay Area.
When Roy Shires was only out there, Roy had him out there, and he was trying to be partners with Roy.
Oh, that's right, and he tried it one time before in the end. That's when Roy Shire had to rejoin the NWA to get some talent to try to beat
that's how.
Normally at one of these I ask, well, what was the typical week or the typical schedule? Because usually, it would be Monday was West Palm Beach and Tuesday was Tampa and Wednesday. This was such a big geographic territory, and also Vern didn't run, as Nick Bockwinkel told me 30 years ago, he loved living in Minneapolis working the AWA because he worked 18 times a month in big cities and had free time. But
where you were working, what, 365 with how many double shots?
How many days did they have in a year, and then two times on Sunday?
Right.
Yeah. So, but explain maybe a typical month. Where would one of the top guys in the AWA, the towns they would make, and the things they would encounter there?
Usually, we always ran Thursday, Friday, Saturday were the major cities. So we'd run Winnipeg on Thursdays, Denver on Friday. Saturday would either be Chicago or Milwaukee. And then Sunday would be St. Paul, or possibly you might do a Milwaukee or Chicago in there.
But everybody got back close to home on that last day.
Oh yeah, yeah, we did. I mean, everybody did. We really in the northern. You're in the south. It was always the best in the summertime. Yeah. In the north, everybody went to their cabins. They went fishing. May 1st, we couldn't draw a dime. From May, we'd take 6 weeks off, and then you'd run your major cities.
Yeah.
Once in a while, you might do a couple of the smaller ones, the fundraisers. But that was about it. So you had most of the summer off with your family. And that's why the guys liked being there. Yeah. And they could work 250 times a year at the most and make a pretty good living. Well,
I always ask guys this. Let's jump into it now, and then we'll pick back up. Well, no,
What were you making? And you're going to find out what I was.
Well,
making. That's where you're going with it.
No,
I won't hurt your feelings.
Any top
You were
main
big.
event talent, but a lot of people think
You were big. You were making that big.
A lot of people think Vince McMahon started big money in wrestling, and we've illustrated that Ole Anderson was making $250,000 a year booking and wrestling as main event talent, and the guys in Florida when Dusty was hot make 100 or 150, and the AWA, even with a lighter schedule, you had bigger markets, bigger houses, and also for many years, and it worked because it had always been that way, you had smaller cards, quality of talent, not quantity.
4 matches in a card.
4 matches,
usually.
5 matches on the
Sometimes.
spectaculars,
Yeah.
right? So what could a guy make there a year? If I believe Nick was probably making 150 easily, right?
I would say pretty good, yeah. They would average. We had probably, let's see, 4, 6, 8, 10, probably 8 to 10 guys that were making 150 to maybe 350, 400 grand a year.
And
So if Nick was telling you 150, and he was champ, he was just trying to make you feel good.
It just still didn't make me feel good.
No.
This was 30 years ago. I just
Yeah.
made $400 that week. Did you drive or did you fly or a combination?
We did a combination. All the major cities you flew to, and at first it was all, you paid for your tickets, you get reimbursed. Denver, they flew you there. They flew you to Winnipeg. Ric Flair and I, our first trip as rookies, we had to drive Minneapolis to Winnipeg, wrestled, turn around, and we had to be in Chicago the next day. We
Was
drove
that a 1,400-mile round trip? Or
We
something
drove
like
with Reggie Parks one time, Springfield, Illinois. It took us 12 frickin' hours to get there. And Reggie, remember Reggie? Cast iron
he
stomach.
made my Smoky Mountain wrestling belts.
Oh my God. He drives back from Springfield the whole 12 hours, drank a case of beer. He never got drunk. He'd drink one beer, and the first beer was like the 24th beer, and he'd talk away and nothing. We'd have about 4. We'd be out. Make that drive. You remember what it was like on the road.
Well, the reason I asked you driving or flying is because I know at some point some of the top guys would take a private plane.
Well, we had one finally.
Yeah.
But that was later on in the 80s. Vern wanted to make sure the guys got time with their family. So the shorter shots, like, Green Bay was a tough drive. At that time, It was 2-lane, and there was deer in the road. You didn't want anybody getting drunk.
Lakes in the way.
We lost Hercules Cortez, and Red Bastien got in an accident coming from Winnipeg one night.
Right.
Hercules got killed.
He was a tag team champion at the time, right?
And it just, I think at that time, kind of, when he could finally afford it, they bought a plane. And it seated 12, but with the wrestlers, you could only put 7 wrestlers and the pilot in there. So usually it was the top guys.
Well,
where you were in the car.
Barron was here, and he said also that the thing was one time you got away with having more because there was 4 midgets. So it was,
then we did, yeah.
But
He'd sit on Barron's lap, one of them, and then
you know where I'm going with this. I wanted to get your take on this. I've heard it from Bockwinkel. I've heard it secondhand from the Baron because the Baron wasn't on the plane. But the day Mad Dog opened the door,
this
it's
is
evergreen, folks. It's evergreen.
It's a long story. But
We got time.
I'm going to tell it the way it happened, okay? We get in the plane, and I think it was Steve Olszanowski, Brunzell, Mad Dog, myself. I think Heenan was there in the back, Adrian Adonis, and I forget who the co-pilot was that night. It would either have to be Ray or Nick. If Nick wasn't on the flight, then it would have been Ray Stevens.
I think Nick said he was on it.
He was on it. So Nick was the co-pilot that night. So on the way down, we're playing. Mad Dog loved to play cribbage, and Mad Dog's kind of a unpredictable human being.
Yeah.
You never knew what you were getting with him. And he would talk short sentences, and everything was, you had to kind of, what's coming up next? He would stop. So anyhow, we're flying there, and this is near the end of Mad Dog's career. He's probably 50 years old, playing cribbage. Nothing said. All of a sudden he goes, Greg, what?
Jesus.
I want you to do a favor for me. And I said, what's that? Ask Joe Dusick if I can wrestle early tonight. I'm meeting my fiance's family tonight. I want to get out of there early. I said, well, okay, no problem. So Mad Dog his knees were hurting and everything. So I didn't find this out till later on. Adrian gave him a Quaalude.
Okay.
So we're in the locker room.
This kind of now matches the flavor of the Baron's story.
So we get to the locker room. I asked Joe Dusick, I said, okay, Mad Dog, you can go on the second match tonight. All right, good, thank you very much. And Joe always had 2 cases of beer in each locker room on ice. So Mad I didn't know, but he had popped this Quaalude, and once in a while he would he would drink a pint of whiskey before he'd go in the ring.
Just once in a while.
Just once in a while.
Just once in a while.
Usually it was in the cage matches, but this night he takes the pill and chugs it down with a pint of whiskey. He goes in the ring. He's not even in there 2 minutes. He comes back. Jesus Christ. Poor young kid. He beat the hell out of him. He sits down and he starts drinking some beers. And we're sitting there, and finally I said, hey, Mad Dog, aren't you going to take a shower? I thought you had to meet the family. I'll go and I want to go. I said, okay, all right. So we're sitting there, and he's drinking a few beers, and finally he goes to get in the shower, and now an intermission comes up, and we're still sitting there, and he's still drinking some beers. Jim and I go in and wrestle. We wrestled for about 40 minutes that night. Came back to get a cold beer. They're all gone. Well, holy shit, what's going on here? So the next scene was we get to the airport, and Jim and I were all at the plane waiting, and there's no Mad Dog, and here comes a cab pulling up, and out of the cab gets Steve Olszanowski, and here comes the Mad Dog. And he's just like this. And he's got barbecue sauce hanging out of his beer and all over his T-shirt. And Steve came and said, what happened? He said, well, he drank most of the beer in the locker room. Then we went to this rib joint to meet the in-laws, and he starts drinking wine. And then he wanted to stop and get another pint of whiskey. And he was getting a little out of hand, so I had him smoke a joint.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Calm him down. I was 50 years old. He's never done any of this stuff, right? So he comes walking up to the plane. And he's staggering up to the plane. And, of course, we're all seated, and he can't sit to play cribbage, so he's pissed.
Yeah.
I want to sit up there. And we're all going, geez, no, you sit back there. So he's next to Adrian. And him and Adrian kind of don't get along a little bit. So Mad Dog's strapped in, and Adrian's talking to him. And we're playing cribbage, and we're at 6,000 feet flying along. And all of a sudden, the back of the plane goes boom. And we all duck. And honest to God, we thought another plane hit us and took the tail off. That's what it felt like.
Jesus.
The plane jerked that much. So we're all down, and we come up, and we look up, and here's Mad Dog. He's standing in the back of the plane. He's opened the door. And the pilot told us it's the only plane built that had chains on the door. Otherwise, it would blown off and hit the tail, and boom, down we go. The top's up, and there's a chain hanging out, and he's hanging out, and all you can see is his back. He's going, it's so peaceful, I feel like flying tonight. And the pilot's screaming at us. He says, get him in. What's going on back there? He said, we think he's going to jump. We'll get him in here. Well, we said, no, we're not going with him. So now he turns around. You know how that look he used to get when he's losing it?
Yeah.
And he starts, everything that's not attached in the plane, he starts throwing it out the door. Bottles of beer, empty bottles of beer. Boom, 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 boom. The case of beer goes out. He opens his wrestling bag. The shoes go, the tights go, the jock strap goes, the shaving kit, everything in there. And then the bag goes. And he's like this, and he ties the frickin' chain around his neck. Now he's hanging out of there backwards. And you can only see this much of him. Oh, it's so peaceful, I feel like flying tonight. And we're going, son of a bitch. So the pilot says, get him in, we gotta make an emergency landing.
Who's going to be one to go walk over there and drag him back from the precipice?
No, he finally got down as we were coming down, and we looked down, and we were in, I think, Cedar Rapids, and they've got 2 Ozark planes held over on a runway over here. Our runway is lined with fire engines, police cars, and ambulance with the red lights going, and the runway is foamed.
Oh.
So the pilot says, look, guys, I don't know if we can make this one or not. I got to put it down on one wheel.
When's the last time you heard your pilot? I don't know if we're going to make this one or not.
No, I mean, thank God he was a really great pilot. But he says, so prepare yourselves. He said, get down in the crash position. He said, because if those stairs catch, we're going to flip. So he puts it down on one wheel. Boom. We come down, and here we see all the squad cars coming. Turn around, here's Mad Dog. He's got foam all over him. He's pulling it off him like this. He fucking takes his belt off, he gets out of the plane, and he starts walking across the runways where now they're letting the Ozark Airlines go. So the police come, and they say to Jim and I, go get him. And we said, go get him. He was at 6,000 feet, open the doors, you get him. The guy's nuts.
Yeah.
No, go get him. They're releasing those planes. So we run out there, and by the time we get to him, the planes are coming down, He turns around and man, he cuffs us. Whop, whop. And we hit him back a couple times, and about that time the jets go by, and honest to God, blew us right over. We got up and we said, fuck it. You can have him. We started walking back. The police come running out. Now they're trying to handcuff him. And he's, I'm going to kill you guys. I'm going to kill you guys. And they can't get his arms back. So they finally walk him back to the plane. And they said, okay, you got two choices, he tells our pilot. Either take him with you or we're going to lock him up. You're not going to lock me up. Nobody's going to lock me up. So pilot says, well, fuck, we'll put him in behind him. And we put...
That's right, they tied him down some kind of way, right?
We put two straps over him. You know, the one around here and one up here. And the whole time he's like this. Can I swear on this thing? I guess I already have. He says, I'm going to kill you cocksuckers when we get out of here. You know, so
he's like he's a Hannibal Lecter with a French accent, right?
Yeah, he was fucking all the way back. And, you know, you're looking at him. Hope he doesn't break loose. So we've landed back in Minneapolis, and we all get out of the plane and go and let the pilot lets him out. So that was the adventure of the small plane with Mad Dog Vachon.
All right.
True story. That's the way it went down, word for word.
I didn't hear it in as much detail, but pretty much the structure of that story from Bockwinkel and a couple of different people now.
Yeah.
But, back to business.